Hi, I'm Tracy.
And I'm Sharon, and we are Feet of Clay.
Confessions of the Cult Sisters.
Tracy.
Sharon. Can we ever move on?
No, man. So this Steve Greisen child sexual solicitation crime, I mean, it is the gift that just keeps on giving. Yeah, oh my God. So like our plan had been that when we're recording today, this was supposed to be part 2 and hopefully the final part of our discussion, the one between you and me about the whole shit show. But instead, that discussion is going to have to wait till next time. And Tracy, how about you tell our listeners why our plan has changed?
Yes. So first of all, if you haven't listened to our previous episode, which would be episode 50, where we interview one of Steve Greisen's former administrative assistants, please go back and listen to that.
Well, and the others before that one too. You should listen to the others. Yeah.
You should listen to the others as well. But this is really a second part in a way to that, because in that episode, I mentioned that we had received a couple of Instagram messages from 2 former administrative assistants that worked for Steve Greisen at Explora Films. Is it Exploration Films or Explora Films?
Exploration Films and then Explore Flicks.
Good job, Sharon.
Usually you're the one that corrects me. So there.
And we wanted to give this second admin assistant a chance to tell her story. Now, the one in episode 50, if you guys remember, it's Kristen, and she went on record and told about her time working there. And so we have invited another one of the admin assistants who we will keep anonymous on this for her protection.
Yes.
And of course, we have to say a trigger warning that goes with this entire series that has been talking about Steve Greisen and his sex crimes. And of course, in this episode also, we'll be talking explicitly about sexuality. And so if you were with someone who's younger, please don't. Please come back and listen when it's just adult material friendly.
Yeah.
So I thought this was a really important interview to get as well. And I don't know if you have any other questions, or we're going to introduce her, Sharon.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say a great big thank you to our listeners for your patience, because we have not been keeping to the biweekly schedule just because of so much stuff in our lives. And we appreciate your encouragement and blah. Thank you. And okay, Tracy, kick us off.
So also for the listeners, I had a pre-call as I did with Kristen before, and Sharon has heard none of this story.
That's right. Nothing.
So she is going to hear this for the first time. And of course, our guest today has already listened to Kristen's story. So we want to give her a chance to be able to give her thoughts and feelings about that, and then definitely clear the deck for her to tell her story. And of course, knowing Sharon and I, we might jump in with some questions. But with no further ado, please welcome our guest.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for coming and talking with us and sharing your story. Yeah, so take it away.
Well, I did work with Steve, and I had reached out because I found out about your podcast because I was on my monthly search for Steve Greisen on Google, and looking at all of the websites he was creating these kind of self-aggrandizing stories about himself to fill up the SEO searches. So I would make sure once a month to go in and look for the news articles and make sure I click the links so that they start to show up in the search engines, and try to share them as much as I could. And I came across your podcast, and it really brought it all up for me from me finding out what had happened. And I reached out just because I knew that this was a big thing and that it impacted, and a lot of people knew about it, but I just don't think I recognized the scale.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I reached out, and I feel like I'm at a personal place in my life where the use of my voice is coming up a lot, and the question of how and when I use my voice. And I feel like this is a time for me to use my voice.
Oh, well, we so appreciate that. And I am going to come back and ask you about the whole search engine kind of rabbit hole. I guess, first off, why are you in the habit of searching Steve Grayson every month? I think that's a really important segue into how you found us and what you've discovered. And I definitely want to go back to the beginning on when you first became employed by Steve Grayson.
Yeah. Well, I found out what Steve had done, I believe it was like 2 years ago, or maybe not even, it might have been last year. I feel like since COVID, time has become more of a suggestion
It has.
than
Right.
something that you can measure by. But it was probably last year, actually. And I was on TikTok, and I'm on the deconstruction side of TikTok. And a video came up of, religious leaders who have been convicted of crimes of a sexual nature. And of course, Steve with his terrible mullet comes up.
Oh, yes.
And I was shocked initially, of course, to see the mugshot and then to go Google him and read the Gazette. But then I was more shocked to realize that I wasn't surprised.
Wow.
And I think that has been something that has stayed with me since I found out, because it's really made me reflect and say, like, why was I not surprised? What was it about that circumstance that didn't leave me in that state of shock? So
Wow,
that's kind of why. Yeah.
That's really profound. That really is. So when did you first start working for Steve and his company?
I don't really want to give the year.
Okay.
I think I should,
Fair
if
enough.
I'm going to be anonymous, but I will say it has been since Exploration Films was founded. And I know he's had several administrative assistants. So I don't really want to say how long I worked there, but it was for a significant enough amount of time where I became a friend of the family, and I spent time at the lodge with him and Nellie, and spent birthdays. His birthday, I used to go to his birthday party in July every year. I was very much a part of his and Nellie's lives.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That gives us a picture. Yeah, it wasn't just a quick temp in and out.
Right.
Correct. And I guess, and you can answer this, we can catch this on the edit if we decide, but as in the list of admin assistants that I know he had, would you have been prior to Karisten's story?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think when she started, her talking about I'm so sorry. I don't mean to laugh.
No, it's okay.
She was like, some of those people did not know what they were doing. And I was like, preach. Some of the things that I kept in the books because it was just the way that they had always been done. And I'm sure she probably caught it too. She was probably cursing me because my name is in there on it. And it's just, you don't want to go and mess up someone's stuff. And I didn't want to for him. But yeah, there was some interesting. It wasn't like anybody was cooking the books. It was just interesting bookkeeping.
Interesting bookkeeping.
Yeah.
Well, and that was one of my hesitations, I am going to say, because I was like, oh, she mentioned the former women, and I don't know how that was going to sit. So I appreciate you calling that out.
Absolutely. I think I've been in the bookkeeping world for long enough to know that everybody kind of has the way that they like to do it, but there are there are general rules that you're supposed to follow, and
Yes.
I don't know that everyone understands all those rules.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when Kirsten kind of explained how she found an ad and answered it, when we talked, I thought it was remarkably similar. So without
Yes.
revealing any time, I don't know if you want to talk about I think what we had asked her too, did you have a background in either ministries? Colorado Springs is a very big area with lots of youth with a mission, very active churches. Did you come from that environment, or how did you stumble across this need of Steve Greison's for an admin assistant?
I'm sorry, Tracy. You said the need of Steve Greison. Okay. Not that need, a different need.
Oh dear. Oh, that's funny.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That sent a shiver down my spine.
Yeah.
So I do come from a background in ministry. I grew up in a lot of different denominations, and I got to experience everything from Catholicism to Baptist to Pentecostal. And I grew up with a pretty wide variety of acceptance of Christianity denominations. So I was aware of YWAM, but I was not a part of it. And I did know someone who had been a part of it, but it wasn't a part of our conversations really. So my introduction to Steve and Ellie was really my introduction into Youth with a Mission. And it was so interesting. It was like an education on its own. But the way that I ended up getting my job with him was through a Craigslist ad. He was a very deft Craigslist user. And there were times in the office where we would like read the misconnections or like make or look up things that people had for sale. So like I know that he understood how to use that platform.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was something that I thought of later after we had spoken. I was like, yeah, that's right. And I don't want to say how much I made, but I know that it came up in the conversation about kind of the way that he ran his business with that same ministry mentality in mind of you work hard and you give what you can, and there's a little bit of you're grateful for what you get. And that was absolutely, I don't want to say exactly what I made, but it was not even what Kirsten made.
Wow.
Yeah.
You give and they take, and you should be happy about
You
it,
should
right?
be grateful that you're getting to serve the Lord.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
And when did you know it was, I wouldn't say a Christian ministry, but had a Christian emphasis or a family emphasis from the ad? And is that something that actually drew you?
Oh man, you're saying that now. I wish I had gone and looked, but I'm certain that it did say something about, it most definitely said something about filmmaking, which I was very interested in. And it probably did say something about like Christianity or family oriented, or the tagline at the time was Curious Minds, something, I can't remember exactly what it was. And it probably said something about that as well, because I consider myself a curious person. And I liked that about exploration films at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you answer this ad, and how did it go?
It went really well. I went to the interview with Steve and the previous administrative assistant.
Was this in person?
Or one. Yes, it was in person in the basement, which always sounds so devious when you say it out loud. But
it does.
It's a well done, finished basement. It's not like a creepy, gross dungeon or anything.
No, it's just the stuff done in it.
It's just right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went there, and then I had the interview, and literally as I was driving away, he called and he offered me the job. And so I got the job, and I worked there for a pretty significant amount of time.
Okay. And that struck me in both stories, Sharon. And for those of you who haven't gone and listened to Kristen's story, please go back. So those were almost identical stories, right? I answered an ad. interviewed, and within hours I was called to
Yeah.
receive the job.
And Tracy, I just want to I want to call that out because you and I have both been responsible for very significant positions within large companies with lots of hiring and lots of staff. And we would never, I mean, I don't care what an emergency situation you're in, you do not hire like that. That's just bizarre to me.
It was a very personal kind of very small business kind of interview. Like you understood that it wasn't a big company. And at the time I was quite desperate, to be honest, for a job. And so I was like, yeah, this actually sounds great. I love this. I get to work in film in Christianity, which is, at the time I didn't recognize it at the time, but I was already deconstructing a little bit. And, it came at a time when I was still kind of straddling that fence and figuring that out. So it felt like a safe option, you know?
Yeah. And I call it out just because as we've been doing more of these stories, and I think even from, the background that we come in ministries, is that Steve Grayson has kind of emerged as someone who is a predator.
Yeah.
And one of their superpowers is really being able to prey on desperation, right? Vulnerabilities, because they can know who they can get in and take advantage of in ways that may not happen in other circles. And I don't want to diminish the fact that you were very qualified for that, but I think it's interesting that you said at that point you were very desperate. And I think when you have those elements at play, it can allow you to kind of be taken advantage of more than what a typical job might entail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, especially you follow the money and you know the disparity between what he is paying his staff and what he is taking and indulging for himself. And it's huge. It's huge. And it sure doesn't sound like something Jesus would do. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
So, all right. So how was the working relationship with Steve and or your interactions with Nellie? Can you describe those a bit?
Yeah. Overall, it was a pretty positive experience, to be quite honest. I got to meet a lot of people and do a lot of things that I had never considered that I might get to do. And that was always what I'm learning to grow out of it, but I've always been a little bit of a silver liner where I focus on the good so that I don't have to look too closely at the things that are making me uncomfortable. And I put up with a lot. He's quite nice, but there are times when he can say things that are quite cutting. And so, there were those times when it wasn't always a kind word. But overall, I do have to say it was a generally good experience.
Okay.
Steve is charming.
Yes, he is.
And I think that's the thing about him is that he is charming until he's not.
I really appreciate you being fair about this. I really appreciate you saying that overall it was a good experience. And, in any human relationship, there's going to be times that are testy and everything else. So thank you for being balanced in that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Well, and I think, Sharon, I mean, that's, if you had asked us even about Last Days, 2 years in, 3 years in, 4 years in, a part of us loved it, right? And I think I can hear what you're saying in your working with Steve Grayson is you end up getting to do things you didn't know you were capable of doing. That mentality of not paying necessarily a workman worthy of their wage in another sphere allows the people who come in to really kind of grow legs and do stuff. I mean, we were doing lots of stuff that we weren't necessarily qualified on paper. And there is that part that we did love.
Absolutely.
And I just see that those often go hand in hand till, I love what you said, till it doesn't work, right? Until there
Right.
is that shift in either being taken advantage of or wanting more and more and more, and where that balance in life begins to get blurred.
What was your first indication or first concern that that kind of began to stick with you?
So the way that I grew up around a lot of vulnerable communities, and the way that he spoke about them was very much of a mindset of like they're less than.
Like derogatory?
Yeah. Like I don't want to like label it in any way, but I also want to be clear that it was not kind. He was often not kind to people that he thought were below him. And that is something at the time that I didn't say anything about. I wouldn't have spoken up about it, but it was something that made me uncomfortable. And I would laugh because he's my boss and my income. But at the same time, it always it was those little things. It's not even, it starts with those little, I feel like they're little gates that open up to bigger ones.
So there wasn't I guess I'm thinking of the scripture that says, inasmuch as you've done it to the least of these, but it sounds like for Steve, the least of these were not honored. They were denigrated.
Yeah, there was a callousness to the way that he spoke about them. Like, he loved, oh gosh, yeah, I can't say that because that'll give it away too. Well, I'll just tell you guys, you can take it out. We were doing
So at this point, our guest shared some very specific and disturbing details with us about Steve's behavior and the things that he said throughout the course of one of his major projects that she was working with him on.
And through the whole thing, he made jokes about...
Steve made highly disparaging racial jokes. He repeatedly indulged in ugly stereotypes, and he literally laughed about ways to cause bodily harm and death to minorities. All of this was really shocking for Tracy and me to hear, and horrible to envision.
And I just was like, that is such an off-color and cruel thing to say to, first of all, the guy that we...
But then Steve went beyond just targeting groups. He also showed direct cruelty towards individuals who were contracted to work with him on his project.
And Steve talked about him like such shit. Like he spoke so unkindly about this man. And it's those kinds of things where I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah.
Wow.
So we were filming around one of these vulnerable communities, and he continued to tell jokes and kind of disparage them. And it really made me uncomfortable in a way that I just wasn't able to speak up about. And I wish I had.
Did you ever notice him doing that when Nellie was around?
No, it was usually a different setting when she was around. Usually she would come around usually at the very end of the day. If like, especially when when I was very first getting to know her, she would bring down like tea and scones or cookies and sit and have tea with us. And it was always so sweet. And it was usually very pleasant conversation, getting to know you and learning who you are. And I'm trying to think of even in the most relaxed times when we were even at the cabin or something like that. I don't know that he was quite as crass around her, but I do know that he sometimes was sharp towards her as well. But I don't think he was ever like I don't know that he showed her his worst self, at least in front of me.
Mm.
Yeah, and I ask that, for our listeners because, the second chapter of Acts, particularly even in their concerts and their songs, I would say if you could describe it as one word, it is a tenderness,
Yes.
and particularly, Nellie, a tenderness for those vulnerable communities and the brokenhearted. And so it definitely flies in the face with kind of the second chapter that we know and love, and that would at least present themselves from this day. And I think genuine, right? I think the siblings were genuine in their heart and in their singing.
I believe that. I didn't know Nellie when you all did, but I believe that about her still to this day, that there's a gentleness to her.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So can you tell me what, if anything, you ever heard or saw or got vibe of the sexual inappropriateness or issues with Steve?
So Steve was never flirty with me. There was never any kind of, the flirtation that Karistan spoke about, I have seen with other people, but I was raised that if you're around a married man, you're not even supposed to wear perfume. So right. So I was very careful. And I've always been like, if I'm around a married man and we're alone in a room, I'm still to this day, I'm just super respectful. And I go out of my way to be like, make sure there's none of that. So I think because of who I am, Steve did not do that. He wasn't flirty with me or anything like that. There was the charming stuff. Like he's very, I don't know how to say this. He can be very compensating when he wants to be. Like he can be like, yeah, you're doing a great job, or complimentary. But it never felt personal or inappropriate.
Okay.
In that way.
I'm glad that you didn't have to experience that.
And did you share the basement office with anybody else, or was it just you two alone for
It was
many of
primarily
those?
just the two of us. However, there was a period where we had some editors because we were doing a couple of films that came in, and like one of them did a little bit of filming and then another one did some editing. And occasionally there would be visitors that would come down, but for the majority of the time, it was just he and I, or just I, in the basement.
And did you ever get the feeling that Nellie was uncomfortable with you guys alone in the basement?
No.
Or
I think just because of who I am, I don't think Nellie ever had any kind of fear. I was not even. I would have no.
Okay.
So that was never a no, but it does raise the question, then why was I not surprised?
Right. That's what I want to know.
And so one time when we were filming, we had put a call out on Craigslist for headshots for local actresses to come and film. And we had been looking at headshots all morning, and I left to go do the mail run and do the daily deposits. And I came back and he had his pants down and was cleaning up from pleasuring himself in the office. And the back door was open. So I walked right in and got eyes with him. And I turned around and walked out, and I froze. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should leave or if I should stay. I realized I could, like immediately the first thing that pops in my mind is I'm not financially in a place where I can just walk away from this job. That's the first thing that popped in my head. And it's what kept me standing there until he comes outside and he's like, sorry, you caught me adjusting my shorts. And the thing that got me was like, there wasn't anything, he didn't touch me. He didn't come towards me or anything like that. But there was a moment of pleasure in his eye, in his face. He seemed pleased almost that I walked in.
That you saw him.
Yeah. And so I called my father and asked him what to do. And he said, don't overreact.
Wow.
You need this job. So, keep the job. Because I actually called him after Steve had left. And right before Steve left, he offered me these lychee nuts. He had never offered them to me before, and they look like testicles.
Mm.
And it was just this like degrading moment.
Mm.
So that happened, and we never spoke about it again. I never told Nellie. And then another time I was walking around, I'm sure at the bottom of the stairs is that bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in there going to the bathroom and with his pants down. And he was apologetic, just like he was the first time. But there was almost this, like, there is a flash of pleasure that went through his eyes that I didn't want to accept.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say I wasn't surprised, there is something that at least I think I did. I'm still kind of working through it. You guys are the only people I've ever told other than my therapist. So it makes me nervous to talk about it, but I've experienced enough in my life to know who the predators are. And I think I have excused a lot of things in my life thinking that because men are Christians that they aren't predators. And it's so often untrue because Christianity really gives them a nice place to be predators.
It's so well said and so important because, even in those exercises where they write a word and it's a misspelled word, but you're expecting to see the right word. So you see the right word because you're expecting that.
Yeah.
And I think that even in this case, as it's come to light, the amount of justification and brushing it under the carpet from multitudes in those circles, I think there's a lot of that element in play. It can't be as bad as it looks on paper because it's Steve Grayson.
Yeah.
Which is devastating. Yeah. So that's ultimately why I felt that way. That I think in the back of my mind, I knew this was not above him. And that's really all I was going to say. I apologize. Go ahead.
No apology. I've got a couple questions. So the putting out on Craigslist, asking for headshots for potential actresses.
Part of the thing was that women were sending in inappropriate headshots.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that all happened literally at the same time.
So given that his arrest was for solicitation to have vaginal sex with an underage 14-year-old girl being trafficked by her mother, were any of those headshots, or did you have any indication of him having a sexual attraction to these young teen type girls? Or did that surprise you?
I don't think I don't think I've ever said this out loud or thought this. Or I have experienced myself quite a lot of recovery from something like this. And I think that there are two kinds of people who generally do something like this. And it's people who are attracted to girls like that. But there's also people who are just attracted to the power. And I instinctively want to say that is who Steve is it's not so much about the age, it's about the power.
Power.
Yeah.
And that's something that you feel like you've picked up in other aspects of how he conducts business and himself.
Yeah. It's the way, just the personality of Steve is very much his philosophy on business, he shared with me once, is very much like what he grew up with in Hong Kong, where, I want to negotiate, but somebody has to lose.
Hmm.
Because he likes that when he makes a business deal that the other person loses a little bit.
Mm.
So I know that it's something that motivates him and drives him.
That the other person loses. He wins, they lose.
They have to lose something.
Mm.
Yeah. Like they can come across and have a great deal, but at the end, the other person has to lose a little something.
Mm. So how did you first, where were you, when was it that you first heard about this crime he committed?
I was on TikTok and I got a video that was talking about religious men who had been convicted of crimes. And so I went and Googled it. And I saw the Gazette article, and then I think there was like a Christian Ministry Watch. Those are the main two that pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized he and I were still friends on Facebook, and that he had still posted like nothing. Nothing happened. And a lot of the people that we had been mutuals with were still friends with him. And that's how I realized that like he was not going to be held responsible in a way that I would expect.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's the staggering thing that we've, been uncovering in these last episodes. And without giving the exact dates, you had been separated from work. I don't know how long or about how long. And if you could tell us a little bit about what made you move on from that. And then were you in any kind of regular correspondence with either Steve or Nellie before you found out about this?
Yeah. So essentially what made me move on was just the fact that I wasn't earning enough to be able to support myself. Most of the time when I worked for Steve, I had to work at least one other job. And
excuse me, I just want to pause for a moment. I just want to pause for a moment because you were the key employee, the admin, making sure that the whole business, all the stuff that was needed to be done to keep the machine running was running. In the meantime, he's got a big, giant, kick-ass, amazing place up in the mountains. He's got a lot of income coming from that. He travels all over the place. He spares no expense in anything. And you are not receiving a living wage. I just don't want to gloss over that. Incredible indulgence and privilege on his part. And I'm going to grant it to him. He created this company and these systems and these means of making money. And he's enjoying that a whole hell of a lot. But he's not paying you enough money to simply pay your own bills.
Yeah.
That is just disgusting to me. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, do you feel that's an unfair characterization, or do you feel that you're always trying to look for the silver lining, that it would be hard for you to have said, hey, he could have paid more and he didn't?
At the time, I was very much of the mindset that I was paying my dues and that
You should be grateful.
There was a sense of it like of that for sure. But I think also my mindset was probably not in the most healthy place. So at the time, no, I didn't recognize that. However, as I did leave and started working in at companies that did appreciate my talents and now pay me an appropriate rate, I absolutely look back at that and I recognize the ways that I have been taken advantage of in many ways by many people, because I just didn't know how to advocate for myself. And people who have power often know that about other people.
Yes. And I don't want to gloss over that aspect because I think that's a really, really important aspect of all of this. And I'm so glad that to hear you state it that way. You know, I keep thinking of that, know your worth, know your worth,
Yeah.
know your worth, right?
Mhm.
And how we all have to kind of come in and discover that for ourselves. But, you know, why I think we want to drive that point home, and I brought it up in Kristen's story as well, is that mindset of ministry that is driven by so many of these leaders who have that sense of entitlement, and they do easily take advantage of those. And I think there is definitely a super evil power that they have to be able to find that vulnerability in others and take advantage of it.
And it's the pleasure that they take in having power over someone else.
Yeah.
That is the common thread that I'm hearing in this, from the manner in which he would talk about the subjects of his films and the interaction with people that are working, you know, on set, and the way he treats his employees and the way he looks at women and the power to go buy access to rape a 14-year-old child. I mean, it's power. It's deriving pleasure from power and taking from another human being. And I just
Yeah. I feel you.
So are you in any circles that are, so you don't have to say where you live now, but obviously you lived in Colorado Springs. I assume that you worked always on site. You didn't work remotely. And
Right.
do you have any connections now?
Yeah. So I never worked remotely. I always, at the time, I lived in or around Colorado Springs when I worked there. So I was always in the office whenever I was working, unless we were filming somewhere. And we did go on site at a few different places, but they were always in Colorado. For my social circles, and like me leaving, and you had asked earlier if I had like remained in like any kind of contact with them. So I was friendly with Steve and Nellie after leaving. Like, I left on really good terms. I had an opportunity to go to another company, and it was an offer I could not refuse, and it went really well. Like, it was a good handoff.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no reason for there to be any animosity or anything like that. And I believe I was invited to his birthday, if not 1, then 2 years after I worked there. So it wasn't like, you know, I wasn't hanging around. I had moved a little outside of Colorado Springs at that time. So I wasn't close, but I still messaged Nellie and was friends with their boys. And, you know, I was on friendly terms. Like, if I'd seen them or anything reminded me of something, to message them on Facebook, like that was always an open avenue. But once I found out what happened, I unfriended everybody, and except for Nellie. And I have wrestled a bit with that. But I actually just reached out to her on her birthday and wished her a happy birthday. So
have you heard anything from her at all, or Steve at all in all of this?
I think that's what honestly breaks my heart just about as much as what Steve has done has been Nellie's response, and the fact that she didn't tell Kristen. Just it kind of devastates me in a way. And I didn't think it was, but like, the more that I've thought about it, it makes me really sad. Yeah. Sorry. I don't want to cry.
No, that's okay. I mean, this is, you know, it's one thing we Tracy and I have said, it's one thing when you read about these names, you know, third party people that you don't know, but when it's someone that you personally know, that you've believed in, that you've trusted, that you felt you had some degree of authenticity with, and then to find out that it's been something else entirely, it does hurt. It hurts a lot.
It hurts a lot. And I think it's the response, right? Because I think we've all been a little our jaws are dropped, that the silence, the lack of acknowledging accountability, the circles around him that also seem to be silent is the part that is sad. And then it moves to anger, because it's no,
Yeah.
you can't be in these circles. You can't be advocating with these taglines that are so smug and so full about how you want all your movies to have purpose, while this has taken place and not one person from the company, not one person from Second Chapter of Acts, nobody in Colorado Springs that we've been able to find have come out and denounced this action and said that there needs to be accountability. And obviously why we're doing this, because that if that continues to be the response of the church and the circles around, this stuff is going to continue.
And I just want to point out also that being around, hearing, and witnessing that dynamic of someone who takes pleasure in power over others, whether it's in business, whether it's in a, negotiation dynamic, whether it's in an employee-employer dynamic, whether it's making fun of vulnerable groups or individuals. I like what you said about we want a silver lining it, right? Love believes all things, hopes all things. Think no ill of your brother. All that stuff that we were indoctrinated with leads us to want to just hope the best, believe the best, turn a blind eye, and say, well, what's the real harm in it? Maybe it's not the best character example of being like Jesus, but, oh, well. But you know what? There's a whole lot bigger, badder shit that is underlying a lot of that stuff. And I bet you, Tracy, it is happening far more often than is coming to the light. Far more often.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's coming to the light more and more and more, just, as our guest says, they were on TikTok, and, it's that ministry watch to the point where people are becoming anesthetized to it a little bit of like, oh, another one. But it is that underlying power dynamic that is off anyway.
Yeah, but like as far as it coming to light, if it hadn't been a sting operation, nobody would know. And how many other times did Steve pay for sex and maybe fuck a minor and whatever else he did? This was not the first time that he did something. Absolutely not the first time. And that's what I'm just saying is that, I think we have to empower ourselves and empower one another to pay more attention to those things that show up on our radar of like, ooh, something's just off here. Something's off. Don't discount it in ourselves when we see that, because that's what we do. We question ourselves rather than questioning what is right there before our eyes, seeing unkindness, seeing arrogance, seeing power over, seeing putting down. That shit is shit. And if we see that on the surface, there is almost always something bigger and badder underneath. I believe that with all my heart now.
I am so glad that you said that. You literally, everything that motivated me to come and speak to you was about that, is listen to that uncomfortableness. What is that feeling that we have when we're around someone who is giving us those red flags that it's not safe? And how do we start to really listen to that? And I don't blame myself at all, but I do feel like I have a part of a responsibility to, if no one else is going to hold him accountable, at least I can do is speak up a little bit.
Right.
I'm devastated that was the response that he got and that he was not investigated. I cannot believe that they didn't look at his computer.
I know.
I am flabbergasted is the only word I can imagine that fits, because how did they not look at his laptop?
I bet you I would bet a shit ton of money. Power again. Power. Yeah. He had the right connections.
Access to it.
Right. With the right
Yeah.
people in power who could pull the right strings and just say, no, we don't quite need to look there this time. I mean, why the fuck else would you not look at the devices? Yeah, there's just no other reason. No other reason.
Yeah. And I cannot say for sure with any kind of certainty that I experienced him doing that before. Like, I can't say that I have any indications that he did. However, I can remember the moments when we would be sitting in the office and he would have a sudden meeting he had to go to. And now I question each one of those times.
Mm.
Or when I would see a cash withdrawal because I was the bookkeeper. I saw all of the withdrawals.
Mm.
And some of them, I don't, it's just petty cash. I don't know. But now I will question.
Right.
Now I question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was going to ask you too with, one of Kristen's stories is that a former employee was getting some cash that she never got. Is that something that you ever experienced?
I never experienced that. He and Nellie one time got me a really nice Christmas gift, which it was a TV. But that was the most generous. Like, I never got a bonus and never got, he did offer me unpaid mental health days.
Unpaid.
And I was kind of offended because I was like, what are you implying, first of all? Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, man.
No, it was.
Yeah, when you first said that, I was like, oh, paid mental health. That is a perk. And I'm like, wait, no, she said unpaid mental health day, a day off.
If you need some time to help with whatever anxiety or stresses you're going through, let's also make sure that you're also going to be worried about money on top of it. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Well, we so appreciate you reaching out and wanting to tell a bit of your story. And it's so similar in so many ways to Kristen's. After listening to her story, what did that feel like for you? Because you didn't know. I didn't tell you. So that is one thing. Listeners, if you guys are going to call us up and, talk to us, we are vigilant about protecting your privacy and honoring what you tell us, and it stays with us. And so neither one of them knew I was talking to the other and wanted to give you time to come on here. So you got to hear that story without really a lot of heads up. I think I messaged you and said, hey, somebody was willing to go on record and we've dropped it. What was that like to hear her story, knowing so many similarities to yours?
It was chilling mostly to hear how he and Nellie did not communicate to her. But everything else felt so like such a familiar echo. The way that she was hired, the nature of the work that she did, that she worked really hard and had her hands on everything. There's a lot of things that felt very similar, even in the way that she communicated the relationship with the sales guy, Steven. He was not there when I was there, but it sounded very much like Steve's office. There was a vibe to it. And I think it was surprising, just mostly that they didn't say anything to her for 2 years. It makes me question what else. I mean, you work closely with someone.
Very closely.
You learn a lot about them and you know them pretty well. And it just makes me wonder what else is maybe not being shared, I guess. It was heartbreaking to listen to it, honestly, because I believe that what Steve wants to accomplish at the end of the day is not a terrible thing. He wants to give families, quality, Christian quality television or whatever. But
does he? Does he?
No, I don't.
I'm sorry.
I don't want to disparage the quality, but I'm like,
no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But my question is, does he really? Is that what he wants? Or is this about money and ego and power? And this is just the venue he was born into. If he had been born into a media family, or he had been born into an automotive family, would that have he was in a missionary family. He was raised in this. This is the business he knows. What evidence is there of a motivation that is truly to serve people in humility, to sacrifice for people, to give to the least of these? What evidence is there of that? I don't see it. I see greed. I see self-indulgence. I see hypocrisy. I see power over. I don't see anything that reflects what he claims his mission to be. I just don't see it.
Yeah, that's very true. And maybe that's the true discomfort that I was feeling at the core of it.
Mm-hmm. When they make it a business, because I'm thinking as you're sharing, it's like, well, there are businesses and people are born into businesses, and businesses, can be kind of cutthroat, and but this is leveraging his missionary background, which I'm going to post on our Instagram. I found a little gem that's a biography of his mother. I don't know if you have read that. Are you familiar with it?
I don't know if I have. Louise, I believe is her name.
Well, I will post it. I'm pretty sure it got published. I don't want to say, but it sounded to me that it got published after this arrest.
Oh, wow.
And so I was very curious at the timeline. And of course, it's almost like missionary royalty, right? When you read the write-up of the family. And if you hear Steve's podcasts prior to this, he is not shy about name dropping his missionary royalty.
Name dropping everything and everybody.
Everybody and everything. And so, Sharon, when you said that, I think for both of these stories, I think what has made me sad for both of you is that if that were his mission here, in great old Keith Green lyrics, they came to your door and you've left them out on the street. He's got 2 women who are coming every day to the basement and giving 150%. And you have one woman that we heard in Kristen who has some health needs and some crises. And clearly you needed to work a second job to get things going. And I am saddened that in all of their mission to take care of people, not countless, not hundreds, not, scores of people, he had 2 women that we know of.
And one at a time, only one at a time.
And one at a time. That your best story is a TV. And it's like, that makes me super sad, because I also had the privilege of working with Miss Sharon, a business owner, and not taglined to be a Christian. And I've watched her pay off people's prison fines, and I've watched her donate to people's funeral. I've watched her go above and beyond to take care of employees that worked for her. And it doesn't take a whole lot when you have one employee. And I'm a little dumbfounded at that, because to me that should go hand in hand as part of the mission, right? That you're gonna work here, we're gonna honor you, you're gonna give to us, and we're gonna help you so that you don't have to struggle so much. So damn it, you might not need that mental health day as much.
Oh, holy shit! Holy shit!
I wish I knew then what I know now, for sure.
Yes, yes.
And we learn and we grow. And that's what life is, right?
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm so thankful to you for sharing with us and with our listeners. I know this wasn't easy. And I really, really appreciate you.
I appreciate the 2 of you. I have gotten to listen to a few of your episodes, and I'm really glad I found you. I love listening to the 2 of you. You are very funny and very down to earth. And I think you're having important conversations that are very relevant right now. And I appreciate you inviting me. This has been therapeutic at the least.
Good,
So,
good.
yeah.
And I know you've helped our listeners as well. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it's always good to put people in connections to these headlines, and they're important, and it's heartbreaking to know that in every one of these headlines there are a surrounding community of people that get really hurt and devastated by these things.
Yeah. I was going to say just a second ago, we were talking about the uncomfortableness that happens, but I do want to say that I was talking to a friend of mine who's agnostic the other day, and we were talking about how when someone's a real one, like when someone's a real, like somebody who lives by their faith and really shows up, even if it's not faith, but just as there's a quality to people, and you don't have to be a Christian to have it. But when a Christian does have it, there is something magical about it. And, I've grappled with my faith, and I'm on a journey just like everyone else. But I just want to say I'm grateful for women like you who you're the real ones. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really, I just think, a wonderful conversation, Tracy.
It was a really wonderful conversation.
Yeah. And we recorded that interview a few days ago. And this is now the first chance that you and I have had to talk about it and kind of debrief. And I listened again this morning to it. And wow, I have definitely got a few things I'd like us to go a little deeper on. How about you?
I am shocked, Sharon. Yeah, I also took time to listen to it again this morning as well. And I knew that we would be recording later. So I'm dying to hear your other thoughts on this.
All my thoughts. Well, the first thing is overall, she is just an incredibly generous and kind and articulate, and I just appreciate her whole demeanor so much. And in listening again, I realize how delicately she understated things, right? She was not going for drama with this. She was really being kind and respectful. Yeah, like I said, I think understating and having subtlety where, frankly, you and I would call some of that shit up a little bit more.
Yes. And, I appreciate that. And I think that's a similar personality for a lot of us, and especially to our listeners who kind of come from that evangelical mindset where we are defaulting to hoping the best, believing the best, trying to be kind. I still try to approach things like that in my life as well. And I think, Sharon, if I might say, I think we got one a little bit of feedback from our other episode with Kristen, where someone challenged us when Kristen said, God doesn't ask me to forgive Steve Grayson. And I think you and I have had some side conversations about that concept and that sentiment. And I think for us, coming out of where we come from, the thought of not forgiving anybody is anathema, right? So I think it's often still a delicate balance between, well, what does that mean? Does that mean excusing? Does that mean not holding people accountable? Like, what does that mean when it's like, I don't forgive somebody? And I think that there's so many of our listeners that it's like, yeah, we believe in second chances. We believe that people and human beings are complex beings, and that it's not all good and all bad. And that's what makes this, so much a mixed pot. But when you have somebody who has done what Steve Grayson has done, and nobody in the evangelical spaces are even saying anything about it, it's a whole different ballgame. So yes, you and I are now in the space where we can say, no, we're going to call a spade a spade. And this is not just, oops, somebody slipped. Somebody was having, a little backslidden time in their life. He motherfucking answered an ad to go have sex with a 14-year-old. Rape a 14-year-old, thinking he's dealing with the mother of said child.
Yeah.
And there is literally no accountability for that. And it's not like, oh, sorry, this is something that all good people just kind of do. And so Steve Greisen is just like, there go I, but by the grace of God, which is a saying that I absolutely hate. And it's like, no, we deal in now secular circles. I deal with people who have never gone to church or had this whole spiritual background, and they don't do this kind of stuff.
Right.
They just don't do this kind of stuff.
Well, I think the whole topic of forgiveness and what does it mean and what are the definitions and all of that is worthy of an episode in and of itself. So I don't want to go too far in that direction right now, but it's also like accountability versus absolution. It's kind of like what they want is, well, Bible says you're supposed to forgive me. So really what I want is for you just to absolve me of all responsibility and of all everything. And we're going to just pretend like nothing ever happened. And that just, another topic.
Another topic, but just to punctuate that we do see and appreciate her kind and tender heart.
Yes.
And her sensitivity and her desire not to just pile on. And particularly Nellie, we both appreciate that because
yes, we do.
Yes, there are innocent people who get caught up in this. And then I think a part of what we're trying to bring out is how then do the innocent people come to this table, right? How does someone who is an innocent party, is silence their only answer? And of course, you and I say no, but
no. Yell it from the rooftops. All right. So I made some notes, surprise, surprise, of some things that I wanted to just touch on or delve a little deeper. The first one is when she said, again, very subtly, that Steve was, quote, a very deft Craigslist user, right? And so I'm like, okay, all right, a little bit of a, what is that really? And that they would together, and I know this was initiated by him, look at the missed connections, which is kind of on dabbling on that personal side. And I'm thinking, why are you looking at that during office hours? That is weird. That is just very, very weird. And I did not realize how much Craigslist was involved and implicated in sex trafficking.
Oh, yes. And I just want to say that, yes, it was understated, but she absolutely meant to say that for that very reason.
That reason.
We didn't catch it, right?
No.
I think, right.
we didn't.
Because we're not Craigslist users, Sharon.
Right.
So I assume that you've done a little digging on Craigslist since then. And I think she specifically said it exactly that way to really indicate exactly what you're going to start to say.
Right. So yeah, I did a little digging and yes, this is kind of old news, but then again, Tracy, we're old and maybe we were out of touch, but I found a few articles. I did a bunch of reading, but we'll add a couple of these links into our show notes. So one was from The Guardian in August of 2010, and it talks about how Craigslist is a hub for child prostitution and this lawsuit being brought by some women who alleged they were trafficked in their youth. And a lot of very credible information and details that were investigated and validated. And it's really intense. It's really intense. And one of the things it said in this article was describing Craigslist as the, quote, Walmart of online sex trafficking. That's what it was known for. So for him to be a very deft Craigslist user, that means a whole lot more now to me before I did this digging.
Yes. And I knew, obviously, we're all familiar with Craigslist killer, right? And I know that it did have a really bad reputation in there, mainly as a dating site is what I would have been familiar with. And so, yes, that it's the hub of sex trafficking, I think is absolutely worth pointing out. And I think that's exactly what our guest meant.
I think so. Two other quick little articles I spent some time reading. One was U.S. News and World Report from March of 2018. And this is reporting on how Craigslist actually shut down that whole personal ad side because of legislation. There was a new anti-sex trafficking law passed federally. And so they shut it down because they were going to be held liable if they didn't.
Wow.
And then there was an NPR article in February of 2020, and it emphasized that the anonymous factor of Craigslist was what was huge in facilitating prostitution and especially child trafficking. Yeah, so it went in depth in that. And like I said, we'll put in the links in the show notes.
Yeah, and that just goes to punctuate on the previous episode. And again, listeners, if you haven't listened to the whole series, everything that has Steve Grayson in the title, please go back and listen to it, because each of these things kind of takes on more meaning as we've uncovered and kind of dived into different things. But when you actually read the transcripts of the ad that Steve Grayson answered, every one of our responses is, this was absolutely not the first ad he answered. I mean, the efficiency with which he got to respond to that and got in a car and went there. And this adds so much more color to that this was a skill set that he had and had developed over time.
Yep. And our guest, mentioning again, quite subtly, her noticing that he had these, like, all of a sudden there'd be this last minute meeting that just came up, and that happened on a very regular basis. And he would just rush out of the office, and the cash withdrawals that just weren't clear about what they were for. So you combine all of that, and I think this shows that there was a pattern.
Yes.
That there was a clear pattern that goes back for years.
Absolutely.
Years.
For years. Oh, and that's the part, like, when I think again of just his family and the fallout, I mean, it's super sad. It just makes me super sad. But I think our guest was absolutely trying to make those connections. And, I think in that default of, well, I don't know this for sure, so I can't, emphatically state these. But you and I, we have learned that these patterns definitely show things. And Sharon, you and I are not afraid to say those things. I'm like,
we're not.
No, when you look at the true evidence of how he answered this ad and got his cash in his pocket and went on his way to do this, then all of those sudden meetings and withdrawal of cash makes so much more sense.
Sure does. Okay. Another thing I wanted to talk about, and this was something that we kind of mentioned very quickly in passing at the beginning of the interview and said we'd come back to it, but we never did.
Oh, shame on us, Sharon.
Oh, can you believe us? The search engine rabbit hole, right? So she's talking about, right, going in and looking and then wanting to click on links to help keep the news, the real news of what he really did, prominent versus all this propaganda, all this, let's look at the beautiful, wonderful, philanthropic man Steve Grayson is, all this other shit that's coming out, which is an absolute intentional play to try to shift attention.
It's so intentional.
But Tracy, I don't know. I don't know what can be done to influence SEO. I made a call, I couldn't really get information. But I did hear that when links are clicked on for articles to be read, or, hey, folks, our podcast, when these things are shared on social media platforms or linked from other websites, it moves things up in the search engines. And I hate that right now, if you Google Steve Grayson, you get, I think there's one reference somewhere to his conviction. And it might have been on Ministry Watch or one of the others. But everything else that's coming up now is all this, what a great filmmaker he is, and all this other stuff. So I don't know what we can do. And maybe some of our listeners out there, it's their area of expertise. But how do we help this not fade out of sight and get replaced by the propaganda?
Well, we keep doing podcasts about it. No, seriously, I was so glad that she had said that. And I did want to return to it because I separately noticed it. So, because we have been at this subject now for a while. And I think it was
it's only been about 9 months. It was last summer.
That's a long time. So I would say about 2 months after I learned about this happening, I also went back in to see, hey, what's happening with this? And that's when I noticed the first appearance of these very weird Steve Greisen links that were coming up that were clearly written by Steve Greisen. I think I made reference to it in another one of our episodes.
Yeah.
And you click on them and there are these little bios and they're just weird. It is, at first I had to cross-reference one of the links because I go, is this the same Steve Greisen? Because it kind of is washing away some of the Christian aspects of his filmmaking and talking about what a great mentor he is and how talented and artistic. And it was one of those links after another.
Oh, fuck.
And I also thought at that time, oh my God, he's doing this because it's newer, fresher material, which is going to, I think, rise to the top and people are going to click on it. And then you find out this amazing artistic filmmaker, Steve Greisen, and the other stuff about his arrest were buried a little bit lower. And so I did key in when our guest mentioned that. So she also knows how that works. And she's intentionally going in to click on the older links to make sure she does her part to keep them in the forefront. And we didn't kind of dive into it when we were with her, but that is exactly what she was doing. And it's exactly what I noticed. And also goes to just the foresight that he's having to bury this part of his reputation.
Diabolical, devious and diabolical. Yep. All right. Well, a call out to all our listeners. Please share this story. It's on the Roy's Report. It's on Ministry Watch. It's on the Colorado Springs Gazette. We'll put those links into our show notes. Please click on them. Please share them wherever you are. These are the sort of things we need to hold these people accountable, and you can help. And share our podcast with your friends. That would be great.
Yes. And which also makes more diabolical the Facebook, that's the official Facebook page of Second Chapter of Acts, and how leading up to, there's going to be big news. Everyone, there's going to be big news. Stay tuned. There's going to be big news. And the big news was that they were, publishing the Second Chapter of Acts treasure trove of concerts on video. And we happen to know that
on Exploreflix, on Steve's platform.
Yes. And so also very intentional to get new content dropped, to bring new content to the forefront of all of these searches that will completely bury the story that nobody addresses.
That nobody talked about. There was one anonymous Christian that was quoted as saying something about this is very difficult. That was it. That was it. Fucking it.
And they chose to be anonymous.
Anonymous, yes. Ready for the next one?
I am.
When she said he's very charming until he's not. And she called out his unkindness. And, Tracy, I've often said that to me, the Bible has, it does have a few little nice, universal, eternal principles in it. A whole lot of bullshit, mostly bullshit, but it's got a few things. And the scripture that talks about to do justice, love kindness, and walk in humility. And I think about that and I'm like, wow, that is the opposite of Steve Greisen on every one of those aspects. And when she said how at times he could be quite nice and at other times quite cutting. And here's one of the things that I think is problematic, especially in Christian circles, fundamentalist circles, but also people that are just gentle, sweet people. It's how much, quote, niceness can offset the basically kicking the dog, right? Like if you saw a person haul off and kick the shit out of his dog, and then you're like, yeah, but he pets it too. He rubs its ears too.
Yeah.
Like 6 days out of the week, he's very nice to his dog. He only kicks the shit out of it once a week. I mean, that's one of the problems we have. It's like, yes, every once in a while someone can get testy and we can say something sharp, but then you know what you do? If you're a decent person, you immediately own it and apologize.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do that, what it shows is your true character. Your true character is revealed when things aren't the way you want them to be. And so you get mean. And that fits with Steve Greisen.
It does fit. And it also fits. I couldn't help but thinking, and I know it's not necessarily the topic of this, but I couldn't help but thinking of a few youth with a mission leaders that I had grown to know over the years. And it was like this personality profile fit them also to the T.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it very telling that those types are drawn to these circles where then there are really good-hearted, genuine human beings that are positioning themselves very easily to be taken advantage of.
Yes.
But I thought it was I could have, as she was describing that, I could think of 4 or 5 faces of youth with the mission leaders that I could have put in that same category.
And our dear Melody Green.
Our dear Melody Green.
Yeah, we got to get around to that later too. But
we do. But yes, it's a very similar. I was not going to even say personality type. It's a character. It's a character in the way they treat other people. Very, very similar.
Yeah. All right. Our guest also talked about Nellie and brought out, just really believing there is a gentleness in Nellie. And I believe that too. Absolutely. Both when we were next door neighbors in Texas, and then the times I'd been with her after all of that, that Dave and I spent time with her and Steve. And when she described Steve being sharp with Nellie, I remember feeling uncomfortable as well, hearing him talk down to her, I don't know. I don't know what it was. It's like something just being like unnecessarily harsh. Like not happy with something she did. And I don't even remember what it was, if it was cooking dinner or it doesn't even matter what it was. But it was just that uncomfortable sense of, wow, he's kind of being a dick,
And Sharon, when I hear that, I am so familiar with that dynamic in so many of the marriages in the circles that we used to travel that I can totally see it, but it's not an unfamiliar dynamic.
And isn't that sad?
It's super sad. It's super sad. And it's usually the male who is behaving that way has some kind of authority or position in either ministry or churches, and they get away with it.
Yep.
They get away with it.
That or they're making up for their tiny little dick that they feel so inadequate about or whatever. And when she mentioned, about early on when she was working there, that Nellie would come down and bring in tea and cookies. You know what that reminded me of?
Oh, that broke my heart a little bit, though.
I know. I pictured Martha Ravenhill. I remember going over, we would go over with Keith and go hang out with Leonard and Martha. And I don't know, I got to sit in on the discussions. It would be me and my then husband, Martin, and Keith and Leonard Ravenhill. And Martha would be serving us. She'd be bringing in tea. She'd be bringing in scones. And it's like, the little Christian woman who knows her place. Now, Martha was a firecracker. I don't want to paint her as this just totally meek wallflower. But still, it's like, here's the role.
Here's the role.
And you know what else pisses me off? Nellie, her amazing talent, her astounding talent. She was Steve's original meal ticket, right? This is not a dude who had great musical talent or ability. She was part of the second chapter of Acts as a teenager, and he glommed onto that whole engine, right? That whole big thing that's going places, that's doing big stuff, that was one of the absolute top Christian artist groups of the 70s and 80s. So She is the one who had the talent, the firepower with that. And yet he treats her like someone beneath himself. And not even to mention the utter disrespect. My God, his betrayal of her over and over and over again.
Over and over again. And I think also why that broke my heart a lot. If our listeners don't know the story of second chapter of Acts, go search it and read about the horrific pain that they have gone through as young kids, losing their parents and, finding Jesus in the midst of that Jesus movement. And so the amount of pain that we all know that they have been through, and just to knowingly put this woman through that is also diabolical. Awful, awful, awful.
Awful. Absolutely awful. Okay, next. Our guest talked about this sense of, when she walked in on him masturbating, cleaning up from masturbation.
Oh, Sharon.
And when she walked in on him with his dick in his hand peeing. And, I know that basement and that bathroom and that setup. And it's like, you don't leave a bathroom door open in a public working office. When I say public, yes, it was in his home, but she was there working full time. You leave the door open in such a way that somebody walking by is absolutely going to see your dick in your hand. I mean, that is intentional. And he got off on it.
He got off on it.
And he gets away with it. So I did have a follow-up call with our guest, and I asked her a little bit about that second instance, because I was thinking, she referred to it as seeing him going to the bathroom. And I wanted clarification. Like, was he sitting on the toilet taking a dump? But no, he was standing there with his pants down and his penis out and positioned in such a way that she could not help but see him. And I think that was very reinforcing for him again. It's that power position of making someone uncomfortable, of leveraging your position over someone who is vulnerable, and then offering her the lychee fruits. And I've been in Costa Rica and we've eaten it. It's this red, fuzzy, weird looking thing. And you peel that off. And then it is this white, semi-translucent, and they look like pale white testicles.
Yeah.
And she felt so degraded. She felt degraded by that.
So degraded. And that is something that obviously her intuition was screaming at her. And I'm glad you're bringing this out, because you could still hear the shakiness in her voice in telling us that story. And listeners, that's why we didn't really drive in and follow up a lot there at that time, because this is one of the first times that's been shared, outside of her own safe spaces of counseling. And you could still hear just how impactful that was.
Yes.
And it's so terrible. But one of the things that I had a previous conversation, and the one that I did the pre-call, Sharon, as she was describing that, I was like, do you think he was trying to test you also, just to see how much you would tolerate, how much you would maybe hopefully even reciprocate, like what your boundaries were?
Ding, 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 ding. That is it. That is it.
And she was like, I didn't even think about that. And obviously, because in her head, I mean, this is just so violating to her own values and the way that she wants to conduct herself, that, and if you listeners have ever been in that kind of situation, if you can recall, she said, I froze. And that's so often what happens when you are in this situation. You freeze and you don't know exactly what to do, what to say, how to handle it. And the glimmer that she still had the wherewithal to be able to detect in him. And I think, he would have been open to an advance had that come to him.
Oh, fuck yeah. Not just open to it. I mean, he was subtly soliciting. That's what he was doing. He was just dangling, tossing out little morsels of bait on a regular basis, right? Looking at the personal ads with her, looking at the missed connections on Craigslist, being on that platform, number one. Then just, she said she saw him be flirty with other people. I witnessed it myself. And then to jack off
Ugh.
leave the door open,
Mm.
knowing that she's coming back any minute.
That she's literally going to get the mail. It's not like she left for the day. I just want listeners to remember that. No, she specifically, because I questioned, it was like, I was not done for the day. He knew I was not done for the day.
That's right. The mail in the bank. And then to make eye contact with her, just, kind of roguish, right? That kind of like bad boy, roguish glint in his eye of just looking at her, making eye contact and wondering if she would say something like, "Oh, nice package," or "I hope you had fun," or just something like that. I know he was fishing for that. And then the same thing with urinating in front of her so that she could see his penis. And then the lychee fruits. So Tracy, all right, we were sheltered. We were sheltered in our teens and in our cult days and everything else. But coming out of my old belief system, in my, I don't know when it was, in my 40s or whenever. And then at the end of that first arranged marriage, I decided to have fun. And I watched how the game was played, right? I saw the little innuendos that men would toss out, and sometimes women. And the looks, after that little toss of wondering whether or not I'd move forward towards it and kind of
Correct.
engage and play that little game or not. And if I was interested, I would play along. But if I was not interested, I knew how to close the door. And our guest said that she did not think Nellie was worried at all because of who she was, right?
Mm-hmm.
She kept that door totally closed, padlocked, no crack in it whatsoever. But that didn't stop Steve from still doing a little gentle knocking.
It still didn't stop Steve.
Knocking time to time. And that he's absolutely trolling. Absolutely.
No, he absolutely is trolling. And it broke my heart on so many levels. And then, to follow it up with a call and have somebody else dismiss this, we just say, hey, listeners, if you're ever in that position where someone's asking you what to do, that's a violation. That's an open violation of someone's workspace, and help give them the voice to call that at that time.
Yes.
So this is supposedly a family-oriented film company. I'm in a secular workplace, Sharon. I can't even imagine that happening among supposedly heathens and people who don't know Jesus, quote unquote. That is such a jaw dropper that would happen in a workplace environment. That is astounding that this could even be downplayed or brushed under the carpet. Like, what?
Yeah.
You're masturbating during work hours in a workspace?
In a shared office.
With the door open? Like, what?
Oh my God. Okay. All right. Well, Tracy, we're going to have at least one more episode about this, but I want to just wrap things up right now on this interview. I think for me, no matter how much this like spiritualized wrapping paper and the pretty bow distractions that they're trying to hide this under with the new articles online and second chapter of Acts concerts on the Exploreflix platform, no matter how much they try to hide it, it's just a big stinking pile of shit. And when I'm saying they try to hide it, I have to say I am moving more and more towards including all of them. Steve, obviously, but on some level also his wife, Nellie. And I'm actually thinking about reaching out to her personally. I don't know exactly how or what I'll say, but I'm thinking of it because I've got, the personal, anyway, it doesn't matter. I got to think about that more, and you and I can talk offline about that. But there is some complicity here because if nothing else, by staying silent, it enables him to continue.
Absolutely. And it speaks, to that whole false narrative about women just have to stay with their spouses no matter what. which is so damaging. And I know that he has sons, but if they had daughters, it's like, you don't model this in front of daughters. You don't model this to your extended family. This is not okay. This is not acceptable to be treated basically like a piece of shit, to be mistreated. And then your role is to stay silent and stay loyal to the end. No, 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 no.
No, 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 no,
and
no.
even if, and I know there are probably people in her circles that would give her permission to leave. And so we don't know what's going on with the decisions that she's making. But if you know of anybody in similar circumstances, please help support them in allowing them to leave and know their own worth and draw a boundary and say, I will not be treated like this.
Right.
And I will not support this, right? Because sometimes you get that, and I know we come from that background where you get this whole martyr complex, right? Of the sufferings of Jesus. And then you can almost develop, well, you don't almost, you do develop this really unhealthy relationship with suffering. And you think that it's a pathway to a closer spiritual relationship with Jesus. And so you don't save yourself even from it, because it's like, this is the suffering that God has chosen for me. And it's no, 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 no. You do not enable him to be the instrument of suffering in your life. You have agency, you have worth, and you have a public statement to make to other people that we do not have to endure this treatment. And you absolutely cannot support this type of behavior through silence.
Amen, sister. And you know what also, though, Tracy? The quote, they, I think it also includes Nellie's siblings. It includes Annie Herring and Matthew Ward from second chapter of Acts. And frankly, whoever else the hell is associated with this, because people are financially benefiting, right? They're financially benefiting from this new release of the music on the Exploreflix streaming platform. And is that why they're quiet? Is that why they're not going to say anything? Because this gives some new revenue to them? I don't know, but yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, you should divorce yourself from that platform, right? You say we cannot subscribe to having our reputation and our legacy tarnished in this way, and they should definitely come out and state that.
They should.
So we hope that there's someone out there that knows them and will also give that message, because they are tarnishing their legacy.
Yeah.
And it's one thing, and I know the whole thing of forgiveness and people repent and they get restored, and whether they're doing it sincerely, blah, 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 blah. But he hasn't even done any of those overtures towards this, right? There's been not one overture towards this is a horrible thing. There's been no statement. So all the more your legacy is being tarnished because there's been silence, and you cannot be silent and look like you're condoning this platform when this crime has been committed and there's not an outcry.
And it's the only crime that we actually know of, but I would bet a gazillion dollars there's more. All right. And well, you know what, Tracy, that also brings up, I would say, I believe there are many other people with tales to tell about Steve Grayson,
right?
And his lack of ethics and his lack of character and his potential crimes. And there are probably some consenting affair partners out there. I've no doubt about that. And I also think there are very likely some women who were quite vulnerable and Steve manipulated them. And so maybe they were consenting at the time, but perhaps now in hindsight, they can see how badly they were used.
Correct.
And if I was forced to choose yes or no, whether or not it truly did or didn't happen, Tracy, I fully believe there have been real life underage sexual victims in his past. I have no doubt in my mind. He might have succeeded in paying for trafficked children through Craigslist or other ads in his hometown, like he was trying on this crime he was caught, or out of state when he travels. And he traveled internationally all the time. And that would give him easier access to trafficked children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was one of the first thoughts I had when I went onto his website and I saw all the locations that he was filming. I just, cried in my heart a little bit because I do know how easy that is to target vulnerable children in certain countries.
Yep. And, maybe at some point, victims or others who have knowledge of that would come forward. There are other people that have traveled with him who may know things. And, I would imagine trafficked children who were raped by him, they wouldn't necessarily know his name or know to come forward, even if they got out and escaped. But I'm just going to say, if there's anyone out there with information or insight on any of the potential crimes committed by Steve, or his unethical behavior, or his just general sleazy doings, if you were a witness or you were a victim, speak up, speak out. Because to me, this is not just about Steve Grayson. This is the pattern of men in power who take pleasure in that power. And when they get away with it, it just enables more of them to do the same.
Yes. And they tend to hide in Christian spaces because it's easier to hide there.
Yes.
And I want to remind people that the tagline for Exploration Films is the focus is to deliver inspiring content that elevates the culture and evokes the best in the human soul. And that is still up. And so the outrage is real. How do you have a tagline to elevate the best in the human soul and the world is silent about this crime against underage children?
Yes. So if you see something, say something. Is it kind of like that?
Yes. If you see something, say something. And then if you're going to claim to be in a spiritual space where you're trying to elevate the human soul, but also save children from real trafficking situations, you cannot be silent about this.
Otherwise, you're just an enabling hypocrite.
Mm-hmm.
An enabling hypocrite. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to end this, right, Sharon? For now, we're going to wrap this up.
Do we ever end? Okay. As I said, we've still got part 2 to do where we're going to talk a little bit more and hopefully wrap up the whole thing. And that'll be our next episode, unless something else comes up between now and then. And Tracy, I was thinking maybe we just have to accept that our recording schedule is more like monthly at this point. What do you think?
Maybe. Yes. We can thank our dear president for making my job harder these days.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening in everyone's lives. So we really appreciate everyone's patience with our scheduling. I did just want to give a real quick overview. So we started down the path of doing the demise of last days, which led us to the Jesus movement, which led us to First Love, which was a documentary made by Steve Grayson, which led us down this path. So it's all going to fit together, listeners, in the end, this pathway of the whole Jesus movement and the people that it produced. And second chapter, one of the music, stars of the time, and Steve Grayson, how he came out of all that, how we came out of all of that, which then led to kind of where we're going. So it all has connections. If you don't believe us, stay patient because we're going to bring it all together.
We will get back to the demise of Last Days Ministries and Keith and Melody Green and that other different flavored pile of shit. Yeah.
Yes. And how it all connects and how we were all born of this time period is known as the Jesus movement.
Yes. All right, folks. Thank you so much for listening. Please rate us. Even if you just go in and do the stars, just rate us. And if you
unless it's bad, do we want them to rate us if it's bad, Sharon?
Sure. I would rather have the engagement. I want people to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah. And leave a comment.
All right.
Leave a comment as well.
Okay.
And
okay, I'm a little fragile. No, I'm kidding. I'm not fragile. Go on.
And share our podcast with your friends. You're welcome to join our Facebook community group, which is Feet of Clay, Confessions of the... What is it? Golly, I can't remember it again. Hang on, let me look it up.
Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters. While she's looking that up, our Instagram is feetofclay.cultsisters. And we'll be posting some of these links that Sharon has talked about and some other little tidbits and gems. So go in, follow that. I think a lot of us, it has to be said, in our current climate, there's a lot of people stepping back from social media for their mental health. We support that. I'm doing that as well. Sharon's doing that as well. So if you kind of subscribe to us or follow us, you'll get pinged when we drop something new, but we're not on it 24/7. We're not engaging so regularly because we also are trying to take care of ourselves and our mental health as well. So we understand that. But as you listen to us and you share and you engage, even with the podcast, it does help the ratings and it helps other people find us.
Helps them find us. Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters community. Okay, folks, we really are wrapping up. We appreciate all of you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience, and see you next time.
Next time.